Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone.
Somewhere, right now, someone is turning down an invitation. Their phone is lighting up with a text. Come out tonight. And their thumb hovers over the reply for 3 full seconds before they type the words they've typed 100 times before. Can't tonight. Next time. But here's what nobody tells you. That sentence isn't a lie. It's not avoidance. It's not fear. For a very specific kind of person, staying home isn't the absence of a life. It's the architecture of one. And by the end of this, you're going to understand something about yourself that most people never figure out in their entire lives. The difference between peace and hiding, between healing and hurting. Because they look identical from the outside, but inside, they are opposites. And which one you're living in changes everything. Let's start with the body, not the mind. The body. Because before there was a psychological label for any of this, there was a nervous system, quietly running its own calculations underneath every decision you think you're making freely. Picture 2 people standing at the exact same party. Same music, same lighting, same 50 strangers laughing too loud near the drinks table. One of them feels something rise in their chest. Not fear, fuel. Every new voice is a spark. Every introduction is a hit of electricity. They could stay until sunrise and leave more alive than when they arrived. The other person is standing 3 feet away, and something entirely different is happening inside them. Their senses are working overtime. The volume of the room isn't background noise to them. It's an event their brain has to process. The overlapping conversations, the bodies moving too close, the expectation to perform warmth on command. Every single interaction, even the good ones, even the ones with people they genuinely like, is quietly withdrawing from an account that has a limit. Scientists call this optimal arousal theory. Every nervous system has a sweet spot, a specific level of stimulation where it feels most alive, most capable, most itself. Some nervous systems need the world turned all the way up to reach that sweet spot. Others reach it with the volume barely on. Neither one is broken. Neither one is better. They are simply calibrated differently, the way one instrument is tuned to a different frequency than another. The person who comes alive in a crowd isn't stronger. The person who wilts in one isn't weaker. They are running on different operating systems, and society has only ever printed the manual for one of them. Here's what makes this so easy to misunderstand. We built an entire culture around the idea that recharging means going out. Weekend plans. Group chats, the unspoken shame of an empty calendar on a Saturday night. So when someone's nervous system reaches its limit at a dinner party and they feel that unmistakable pull toward the door, toward silence, toward their own 4 walls, they don't call it what it is. They call it being antisocial. They call it being difficult. They call it a flaw they need to fix. But what if it isn't a flaw at all? What if it's simply the sound of a battery reaching 0, the same way your phone dims its screen and shuts down when it hits 1%? Nobody accuses a phone of being broken for needing to charge. And yet we accuse people of the exact same thing every single day. Because here's the part that changes everything. For the person wired this way, home isn't where life pauses. Home is the only charger that actually works. And once you understand that one fact, you start to see an entire hidden world operating right under the surface of ordinary life. But the nervous system is only the first layer of this. There's something else going on underneath it, something about control. And once you see it, you'll never look at a quiet night in the same way again. Walk into any home belonging to someone who genuinely loves staying there, and you'll notice something almost immediately, even if you can't name it at first. Everything has been chosen. The lighting is dimmer than a stranger might pick, softer, warmer, deliberate. The volume of the television is set to a level that feels like a held breath rather than a shout. The blanket on the couch is in the exact spot it was left in last night, because it will be needed again tonight, at the exact same time, in the exact same way. This isn't decoration. This is architecture. It's a structure built, piece by piece, around a single unspoken need: control. Out in the world, control is an illusion nobody gets to keep. You don't choose the stranger who sits too close to you on the train. You don't choose the coworker who corners you at your desk for 45 minutes of small talk you never asked for. You don't choose the traffic, the noise, the sudden change of plans, the small talk with someone who will forget your name by tomorrow but is asking you invasive questions about your life tonight. For most people, this unpredictability is simply the cost of being alive in a shared world. Annoying, sure, but survivable. Background static. But for someone whose nervous system runs closer to the edge, someone with heightened sensitivity, someone carrying anxiety they've learned to mask so well that even they sometimes forget it's there, that unpredictability isn't background static. It's a threat alarm going off in a room they can't leave. Every unplanned interaction becomes a small emergency their body has to manage in real time. Their heart rate climbs a little during ordinary conversations that wouldn't register on anyone else's radar. Their mind is already 3 steps ahead, rehearsing exits, monitoring tone of voice, scanning faces for signs of judgment that may not even be there. This is exhausting in a way most people never have to comprehend, because most people's nervous systems simply don't do this. And so, for this person, home isn't an aesthetic preference. It's a regulation strategy. Every choice they make there, the dimmed lights, the closed door, the familiar blanket, the same show playing in the background, is their body's way of saying, here and only here, nothing can surprise me. That isn't avoidance. That's survival intelligence, built by a body that learned, sometimes the hard way, exactly what it needs to stay regulated in a world that rarely asks what anyone needs at all. Think about the version of this that plays out at work, because it's happening there too, just wearing a different costume. The open floor plan. The desk with no walls, no door, no barrier between one nervous system and 40 others. The colleague who swings by just to chat during the 120 minutes of focused silence you manage to protect all day. For someone who regulates through control, an open office isn't a modern convenience. It's a slow, quiet siege. They learn to build walls out of things that aren't walls at all. Headphones that aren't playing anything. A calendar block labeled meeting that is actually just 45 minutes of nothing, guarded fiercely, because it's the only 45 minutes that belongs to them. And when 5 o'clock finally arrives, they aren't just tired the way everyone else is tired. They are regulated out, spent from a full day of managing a world that never once asked permission before interrupting them. And this is where something remarkable happens. Something almost nobody talks about, because it doesn't fit the story we've been told about what a full life is supposed to look like. Because in that quiet, controlled space, something starts to happen inside the mind that could never happen in the noise. And it's about to explain why some of the most brilliant ideas in human history were never born in a crowded room at all. There's a version of you that only shows up when no one else is around. Not a lesser version, not a lonelier version, a deeper one. Because here's something the party culture never tells you. The brain doesn't do its best thinking while it's performing for an audience. It does its best thinking in the in-between moments. Washing dishes, staring at a ceiling, walking nowhere in particular with no destination and no deadline. Neuroscientists have a name for the network that lights up during those quiet, unstructured moments. The default mode network. It activates precisely when external stimulation drops away, when the brain is no longer busy managing eye contact and small talk and social performance, and is finally free to wander into its own internal landscape, connecting ideas that have been sitting there, unrelated, waiting for exactly this kind of stillness to collide. This is why so many breakthroughs in history didn't happen in boardrooms full of people talking over each other. They happened in solitude. A scientist staring out a window, a writer alone at 2 a.m., unable to sleep, chasing a thought that wouldn't let go, an artist sitting with a blank page and nothing but silence for company. Solitude isn't the empty space between socializing. For a certain kind of mind, it's the workshop where everything actually gets built. Studies on people who genuinely enjoy time alone consistently find something striking. They tend to score higher on measures of creativity. They tend to be more introspective, more capable of sitting with a problem long enough to actually understand it instead of rushing past it. Not because solitude makes people smarter, But because solitude removes the constant tax that social performance places on the brain, freeing up bandwidth for something deeper to happen. Think about the last truly original idea you had. Was it in the middle of a crowded room, mid-conversation, trying to remember someone's name while also formulating a response? Or was it in the shower, in bed at midnight, on a solo walk with no one to perform for? There's a reason for that, and it isn't a coincidence. It's neurology. And yet, despite all of this, despite the science quietly proving that solitude is where depth is born, we still live inside a culture that treats a quiet Friday night as something slightly tragic, something to apologize for. And that's the next layer of this story, because the shame someone feels over loving their own company isn't coming from inside them at all. It's coming from somewhere else entirely. And once you see where, you won't be able to unsee it. Open any social feed and you'll find the same performance playing out on repeat. Sunset rooftops, clinking glasses. Captions that read, "Living my best life," over a photo that took 11 attempts and a filter to look effortless. This is the story we've been sold. That a life well lived is a life witnessed. That joy only counts if there's an audience for it. That staying in is what happens when you have nothing better to do, rather than something you actively, deliberately chose. But consider this for a moment. What does it actually mean to live your best life? For one person, it might genuinely be that rooftop, that noise, that electricity of strangers becoming friends by midnight. There is nothing wrong with that life. It is real, and it is full for the nervous system built to metabolize it. But for another person, their best life looks entirely different. And it has been hiding in plain sight the whole time, dismissed as boring simply because it doesn't photograph as well. A documentary about deep sea creatures. A bowl of soup made slowly, on purpose, with nowhere to be afterward. A blanket. A book that's been reread so many times the spine has given up. Zero obligations. And the quiet, radical peace of an evening with nothing to prove to anyone. That is not a smaller life. That is not a consolation prize for someone who couldn't get invited anywhere. That is a different currency entirely. And the person spending it isn't missing out on anything because they were never trying to buy what the party was selling in the first place. This is what psychologists call low stimulation preference. And it deserves to be understood correctly because it has nothing to do with having a boring inner world. If anything, it's the opposite. These are people whose inner world is rich enough that it doesn't need the external one constantly feeding it. They don't need a room full of strangers to feel something. They already feel plenty, sitting alone with their own thoughts, their own coffee, their own version of a perfect evening. But here's the uncomfortable question underneath all of this. The one that separates the people simply living differently from the people who are actually suffering in silence. And it matters more than anything we've covered so far. Because not every quiet night in comes from the same place. Not every closed door means the same thing. And this is where the story gets far more complicated and far more important than a simple celebration of introversion. There is a version of staying home that is peace. And there is a version of staying home that is a cage disguised as comfort. From the outside, they look exactly the same. Someone cancels plans. Someone stays in. Someone tells their friends, maybe next time. But underneath, one of these is a nervous system choosing what it needs. And the other is a nervous system in hiding, convinced, quietly and persistently, that leaving isn't just undesirable, it's unbearable. For some people, home has stopped being a sanctuary and started being a fortress against a world they no longer trust. Social anxiety doesn't whisper, "I'd rather not." It screams, "You will be judged. You will say the wrong thing. Everyone will notice. Everyone will see." Depression doesn't offer a preference. It offers a question with no good answer. What's the point? And for someone carrying real trauma, someone who has been hurt in rooms full of people before, staying home isn't a lifestyle. It's a wound that learned to protect itself the only way it knew how, by closing the door and never opening it again. This shows up in relationships too, in ways that are easy to misread if you're not looking closely. A partner who needs an entire evening of silence after a long day isn't rejecting the person beside them. They are, in that moment, incapable of giving anything to anyone until they've first given something back to themselves. But a partner who has quietly stopped attending anything, who has slowly withdrawn from every shared plan, every friend's gathering, every reason to leave the house at all, might be describing something else entirely under the same 3 words. I'm just tired. Boundaries protect a relationship. Avoidance slowly erodes one from the inside, and the two can sound identical across a dinner table if nobody asks the deeper question. This is the distinction that changes everything, and it deserves to be asked, honestly, without flinching. Do you stay home because it fills you up? Or because leaving feels like more than you can carry? Because one of those is self-knowledge. The other is self-abandonment wearing the same outfit. One person stays in because their cup is already full, and they simply don't need to go looking for more. The other stays in because they are terrified of what might happen if they try to fill it anywhere else. The tragedy is that both of these people will say the exact same sentence to their friends tonight. I'm just staying in. And only one of them is telling the whole truth. This is why the question matters so much more than the behavior itself. Because you cannot diagnose a life from the outside based on a canceled plan or a quiet Saturday. You have to look inward, honestly, and ask what's actually underneath the decision. Is there lightness in that choice, or is there dread? Is there relief, or is there resignation? Because peace doesn't come from fear. Peace comes from knowing exactly what you need and giving it to yourself without apology. And once you can tell the difference in your own life, something shifts. You stop wondering if you're broken, and you start understanding exactly who you are. Because for the people who genuinely, truly love staying home, the ones whose solitude is chosen rather than forced, life doesn't feel empty at all. It feels full of the smallest things, the ones the rest of the world rushes straight past without ever noticing. The particular way morning light moves across a kitchen table while the coffee is still too hot to drink. The exact groove worn into one spot on the couch, shaped over months by a body that returns there because it finally feels safe. The specific, sacred silence of a Tuesday evening with absolutely nowhere to be and no one to explain that to. These aren't small things to the person living them. They are the entire architecture of a rich, deliberate, deeply felt life. This is what psychologists mean when they talk about savoring. The practice of slowing down enough to actually register joy instead of letting it blur past, unnoticed, while chasing the next thing. And people who love their own company tend to be remarkably good at it because they've had the practice. They've spent years learning to find meaning in stillness, while everyone else was still out there searching for it in noise. So if you're someone who turns down invitations without a flicker of guilt, if a solo Saturday genuinely makes you feel more like yourself, not less. If you'd rather rewatch the ending of your favorite show for the 9th time than force yourself into a room of strangers making small talk about the weather, you are not broken. You were never broken. You were simply wired for depth over noise, for peace over performance, for a version of living that doesn't need an audience to feel real. And here's the perspective shift that changes how you see the rest of your life. Worth was never supposed to be measured by how many rooms you walked into. It was never supposed to be counted in photos taken or invitations accepted or plans that made it into someone else's story about you. Worth lives somewhere quieter than that. It lives in the way you show up for yourself when absolutely no one is watching. In the softness you offer your own evenings. In the peace you build, piece by piece, inside 4 walls that finally, truly belong to you. The world will keep telling you that a full life is a loud one. But some of the fullest lives ever lived were the quiet ones, built one deliberate evening at a time, by people who finally stopped apologizing for knowing exactly what they needed. If any part of this felt like it was describing you a little too precisely, there's more waiting. Because the next one goes even deeper into the parts of yourself most people never get the language to understand. Go watch that one next.